All right, so I am really excited to introduce you all to Crystal Cherry, today's webinar host. Crystal has over 20 years of experience in the nonprofit sector, serving missions such as educational institutions, human service organizations, and faith-based missions. Now, as a board consultant for nonprofits, she equips, empowers boards to support their mission and change the world. She serves as the CEO and principal of the Board Pro, and her services include recruitment, governance, fundraising, conflict resolution, and diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging. Crystal's a true expert on all things board of directors, and so I'm really thrilled to turn it over to Crystal. She'll have so much fun with her in this webinar today.
Thank you, Wendy. I am so
Yeah.
excited to be here to talk about two of my favorite subjects. The first, of course, is fundraising. Like you, I'm a recovering fundraiser. I worked in the nonprofit sector as a fundraiser for about 23 years. And then about 3.5 years ago, I pivoted over to, after a year or so of consulting, I pivoted over to working primarily with boards and also working with boards and fundraising. So these are my favorite topics. I am really excited about this presentation. I'm glad you guys can see my fire because we're going to fire you up today to talk about joyful fundraising for board members. And so let's go ahead and move forward, Wendy. Thank you. So we did the icebreaker, right? The icebreaker question was, what was the first concert you ever attended? And I saw Prince and Billy Joel and the Monkees, and Wendy mentioned hers was Taylor Swift. Mine was Earth, Wind, and Fire back in 1986 in New York. And so I'm so glad you guys indulged me in that fun activity. So here's my informal introduction. I like to always share who I am and what I've done, because inevitably I'm going to have some things in common with some of you. So when I say your thing, just give me a high five in the chat or say, oh yeah, or whoop whoop, or whatever it is. So if you are a trained fundraiser like me, high five to you. I know how hard it is. Oh my goodness. I'm also a board consultant, as Wendy has mentioned. I'm also a board member, so I know what it's like to actually sit in those seats as board members. I sit on 2 boards here in Atlanta. I'm also a volunteer. I make sure I get out a couple times a year with my son and get out there and give back to the community. So high five if you're a volunteer. I'm also a donor, right? I know the importance not only of giving your time, but also giving your treasure, right? And so you want to put your money where your mouth is. So if you're a donor, whoop, whoop to you. I'm a native New Yorker. So I see that a few of you are from Florida and California. Someone said they worked in Latin America. But if you're a native New Yorker or have lived in New York or you want to go to New York, high five to you. I'm actually going to New York in a couple of weeks. I'm a breakfast lover, can eat it any time of day. So if waffles and eggs and bacon is your jam, high five to you. I'm a news junkie. I never used to watch the news, but because the world is so crazy and interesting, I just want to keep up what's going on. So if you're a news junkie, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, high five to you. I'm the oldest sibling of five kids. So if you're the oldest sibling, I know what it's like having to be the leader, right? Everyone always says I was the favorite because I was the oldest, right? But I think my youngest baby sister got the most out of my parents. But anyway, John Legend. Oh my God, I'm a John Legend fan. If you love John Legend, Ordinary People, high five to you. I'm a summer baby. My birthday is coming up in August. If you're a summer baby, or particularly in August, if you're a Leo, high five and whoop whoop. And I'm also an author. I'm excited to share that I wrote a children's book a couple of years ago called Mac and Cheese. Being different is okay. The main character is Mac, which is my son. He's on the left-hand side. His name is Malcolm, and I call him Mac. You can see my little dog, Charlie, who Malcolm is holding, is also on the cover of the book. But it's really a wonderful little tale about 2 little boys who learn they don't have to change who they are to be accepted. And during this time where diversity, equity, and inclusion are all the buzzwords we've been talking about, I thought it would be a great little time for us to talk to children about what it's like to be different and accepted no matter who you are, coming to the table, being your authentic selves, not having to lay any of your identities aside to be accepted. And so this is what this book is about. It's available on Amazon for $12.99. That's my shameless plug. So if you want to get a copy, please do so. Okay, let's move forward. So I wanted to throw out a question to you, and I know you guys can't talk, but you can put it in the chat. And so I want to ask, what is the one thing that you think illustrates whether or not an organization, maybe yours, is thriving. What do you think? Just put it in the chat. What is the one thing that if you have this thing going on at your organization, you guys are off to the right foot? I mean, you are killing it out there. What do you think it is? Put it in the chat. What is the one thing? Manage your mission and your margin. Okay. Helping, great team involvement, contracts and donor support, increase. All right, I'm strong fundraising. Okay, I thought that was going to come. All right, Wendy, let's see what I have in here. We have a strong mission, a solid cash reserve, a charismatic executive director, diverse revenue streams, and I think there might be one more, low staff turnover. All of those things help determine whether or not your organization is thriving. If you have an executive director who's not a people person, I remember one time I worked for an executive director who told me she wasn't a people person and she didn't like to go out and shake hands and talk to people. And I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to be responsible if you're not going to go out and talk to people? Yes, all of these things illustrate whether or not you are a thriving organization. But I say that the thing that really determines whether or not your organization is thriving is the relationship between the board chair and the executive director, right? These are two folks who manage the two most important stakeholder groups of your nonprofit, your staff and your board, right? And if these two are not working in collaboration and modeling leadership and making the best decisions in the interest of the organization, which impacts staff, right? Which impacts the budget, right? Which impacts whether or not the community really has a great perception of you. These two people are shaping the narrative for your nonprofit. And so I say leadership really matters. And so if you disagree with me, that's okay. But because I work in this space and I work with boards, and I work with CEOs, I have seen CEOs and board chairs who have a wonderful relationship, and you can see it and feel it in the organization. And then I have seen situations where they're not feeling each other. There's some hostility going on. The board is not talking to the CEO. The CEO is not talking to the board. And it's just a hot mess. And so I say, who's at the top matters. That is my motto as the board pro. Okay, let's move forward. Right. And so we know that one of the problems is that the board sometimes they're not clear on their responsibilities. And a lot of times the fundraising team and the staff, they don't know what the board is actually supposed to be doing. So I thought I would just share some main responsibilities. Their main responsibility is to hire and supervise that executive director, making sure that he or she has the support that they need in order for them to lead, right? They have to have their back, right? They have to know the mission. They have to understand what the purpose is of the organization. And then they do other things. They monitor your programs to see how they're doing. They definitely want to make sure you have financial stability, right? So they're looking at your budget. They're making sure you're making prudent decisions, looking at what's coming in, what's going out. Of course, they're supposed to be exhibiting legal and ethical integrity. And then, of course, bringing in new board members to make sure that this leadership continues. Even when the old ones roll off, there are some new ones that come right in. So these are some of the expectations. So if you wasn't sure exactly what your board should be doing, these are the things. And there's probably 25 more other little bullets of things that they should be doing. But these are the main ones. They're supposed to be helping you to fundraise. They're supposed to be helping you to advocate your organization, to support that executive director, to make sure that money is being used wisely. All of those things. Let's move forward. So when you bring in a new board member, and this is what I tell my clients, start out from the very beginning, right, with a contract so that they understand what it is they're supposed to be doing, right? So all the things I just mentioned to you should be in a contract so that they understand, here's the board job description, and here's a contract sharing, this is what you're expected to do, right? You're expected to exhibit legal, fiscal, and moral responsibility. You're expected to attend meetings. Many organizations will ask boards to make a meaningful donation of $500 or $1,000, participate in fundraising activities, and they should understand that should they fail to fulfill those commitments, that they need to have a strong conversation with the board chair as to whether or not this is the right time for them to serve, right? And you should have provisions in your bylaws in terms of how do you remove a board member who's not performing optimally, whether or not they're not attending meetings or they're not engaging or they're not fundraising, how do we ask them to exit the bus, right? In a nice way so that we don't burn bridges. But this is something that we like to say to my board right out of the gate. Let them have a contract so they can, and have them sign off on it so they can see that this is what they committed to doing. So fundraisers, this is what your board should be doing. If you didn't know, contracts are really important. Okay, let's move forward. So I want to ask you, excuse me, ask you some trivia questions. And these are all true or false, right? And tell me here, I'm going to give you a second to read it and tell me, I think they're all true except one. So which one is not true? Fundraising tops the list of board challenges. The number one reason why people do not donate is that they're not asked. Now, every fundraiser should get that one, right? The board must model giving behavior. Philanthropy needs to be taught before you can fundraise. Organization owns their donors. It's easier to get money from an existing donor than $1 from a non-donor. 90% of fundraising work is cultivation and 10% is asking. Which one is not correct, you all? All right, fundraisers, y'all should know this. Okay, okay. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Organization owns their donors. That's right. The organization belongs to the community, right? The donors are members of the community. They don't own you as a donor. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, you guys passed that test. Let's move forward. All right. So why do boards resist fundraising so much? Because I think that is the least sexy part of board work. Everyone wants to be on the board because they want to advocate for a passionate mission that they feel passionate about. Of course, it's a resume builder. It's an opportunity for you to network and hone your skills. But when it comes to fundraising, everyone panics. Everyone freezes. No one wants to do it. And they're like, oh my God, I can never ask anyone for money. I'm not a fundraiser. It's just not my thing. But you know what? They don't really know what fundraising is, right? And most of the time they're not equipped because we've not equipped them. The organization, the fundraising team, the CEO has not equipped them, really giving them the skills that they need so that they can understand what fundraising is, right? They don't want to trespass on their friends. Because I'm a fundraiser, I don't care about that kind of stuff. In fact, most of my friends and family know when they see me coming, I'm going to be asking for something. I'm always coming to the book club meeting, to the cookout, to the sleepover, the girls' night out. I'm always talking about some new organization that I just found out about. And I'm like, okay, guys, I just found another great organization. I need everybody to cash at me $25. We're going to make a donation to this organization. And they're like, oh God, here she goes again. I don't care about trespassing. I'm like, you have $20 that you're going to blow in Target next week. Give me that $20 and let's give it to the organization doing phenomenal work. But most of the time, people are scared to do that, right? This is fear of rejection. And to me, fundraising is yes or no. I'm not scared of the word no. So if you say no to me, my feelings are not hurt. It's not personal. I know there are many reasons for no's, and we could talk about that later too. And also, the personal relationship that they have with money, right? If you're always struggling with money in your own personal life, then you feel weird about people asking you for it, and you certainly don't want to ask other people for it. So these are some reasons why I think board members resist fundraising, and we're going to flush through some of these and hopefully help them to feel more comfortable. But let's just talk about some of the board challenges overall, you guys. Why are boards and many times broken? Because we know that a lot of boards are dysfunctional. A lot of boards are not working like they should. And why is that? That's the question. That's why I'm in business, right? As a board consultant, because they're always calling me when there are issues. But a lot of times they're not clear about what the mission is. You'd be surprised how many board members really don't know the mission of the organization they're actually serving. They have an inkling, but they're not 100%, right? There's a lack of leadership and role models, right? At the top. Remember, we talked about that. Poor communications amongst board members, right? Expectations not clear. I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to be doing as a board member, which is why that contract I just told you about is so important, right? They're not engaged, right? A lot of times people will come to a board meeting, they may come in late, they may come in after work, they're distracted, they stamp a little reports and then they're gone until the next board meeting in the next 3 or 4 months. And they're not engaged in between board meetings, right? The fundraising strategy is not defined, right? There's a lack of training, as I mentioned earlier, about how to fundraise. They have misconceptions about fundraising. And then the words joy and fundraising are never used in the same sentence, right? So this is the trepidation that boards have about board service and also about fundraising. And if you have any others, Any other challenges that your board may be experiencing? Put it in the chat. I would love to hear what challenges you're having with your board. Not recruiting the right people to be on the board, right? Not knowing exactly what skill sets are needed to actually lead your organization. So if I've missed anything, somebody said I didn't put on here the lack of diversity or representation, and that is so true. We have so many folks who are making decisions about our communities who are not members of those communities, right? And so representation matters. And if your board is not diverse and not representing the people that you're actually working to help, that's problematic, right? Uninterested in change despite data. Yes. And that goes to some people have been on the board for way too long, right? And we don't have younger people on the board who think differently, who see the world differently, and know that things are actually changing. And I do a whole training on integrating DEI into board work, which I delve into some of these things. All right, let's move forward, Wendy. Okay, so here's some questions for you, right? Is your board fundraising ready? Right? Because everyone says, oh, my board, they don't raise money for us, they don't do anything, they're so lame. But my question to you is, have you prepared them, right? Are they ready? Have you accessed your board's fundraising culture, right? Do you, if you have a board member who's not willing to cultivate and steward gifts, or network, maybe he or she shouldn't be on your board if that's what your boards are supposed to do. Let me be clear, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not board members should actually raise money for nonprofits. They kind of feel like, well, we have a fundraising team, we have fundraisers who actually do that. That is not my role as a board member. And there's a lot of debate back and forth about that, And so for large organizations, they may have a fundraising team of 35, 40 people. Maybe the board is not as active in fundraising. But the smaller ones, for sure, they don't have staff, they don't have resources. They definitely need the board to step in and to help them raise money, right? How about place fundraising on all your board meeting agendas to discuss accomplishments and challenges, right? Publicly acknowledge board members involved in the process. Do you have adequate staff and resources to make sure that fundraising is going to be successful, right? Are you including fundraising education in your board development activities? Like, let's do some role playing to really understand what it feels like to actually ask someone for some money, right? Have all board members sign a contract that includes fundraising expectations. So these are some of the things that you can do to get your board fundraising ready. You have to kind of normalize giving and understanding what it really is, right? And so to fire them up and create this culture of philanthropy, and I kind of hate that term because it's so overused, but it's like a culture where we normalize giving, where everyone understands the importance of giving and recognizing people when they give, right? Making sure that on the agenda, at your board meetings, you're sharing mission moments that keeps the board hyped up and excited and fired up about the work that your organization is doing. Like, they're really pumped that they're a member of a group, of a nonprofit that's doing great work, right? Making sure they have all of that information, showing them some infographics, showing some of your impact numbers, like we served 400 kids today, or we've increased our donor database by 300 in the last 2 years, or, we've increased our programs, whatever it is, making sure that you have some wonderful infographics, statistics to show them in the form of an infographic, right? Making sure there's some really good talking points so that everyone is saying the same thing about the organization, knowing what that elevator pitch, I don't even know if people do that anymore, but it used to be 3 minutes. We don't even have 3 minutes. You have to have like a 90-second a 90-second elevator pitch where everyone knows the key things to say. I call them points of pride. We'll talk about points of pride in a little bit. And then pair off practicing, asking, and how it is to have conversation, engaging with people about the work that you're doing so that you can lead into, find out if they're interested in giving, how much they might be able to give, and what to do if they say no, and what to do if they say yes. Right? And making sure there are opportunities for them to engage in fundraising activities. So this is ways that you can fire up your board to actually raise money with you. And remember, board members are people, right? Just like we cultivate relationships with donors, fundraisers, We have to cultivate the relationships with our board members. Now, it can be challenging if you're in an environment where you're not invited to the board meetings. I have been in both situations where, as the chief fundraiser or the director of development, I was invited to be in the board meeting. So I got a chance to meet them every month. Even if I wasn't sitting at the table, I was in the room. And so after and before board meetings, I had a chance to network and get to know them and learn about, their families and their birthdays. And so I can start building relationships with them. If you're in a situation where you're not invited to come into those rooms, it makes it a little bit more difficult for you to build relationships. But you do nonetheless need to get to know who your board members are. People engage and work with people they like and they feel like have their best interest at heart. So you have to build relationships with your board members if you want to engage them in fundraising. Okay, let's move forward.
Can I throw a quick question in before we go to the next slide?
Yeah,
From
go.
the Q&A. All right, Kevin says, what does providing outreach opportunities look like besides event engagement?
Looks like besides what?
Event engagement.
Oh, okay. So for instance, when I was the chief development officer at my organization, I had a menu of things that I had to do every week. And sometimes I had more things than I had time, right? And so I would send weekly out to my board, these are the things I can use help with this week. I need someone to call a donor to say thank you. I have a grant application that's due in 3 days. Can someone take a look at it? If you have someone who's like attention to detail and they want to look at the grant application just to make sure there's no commas missing or whatever, I would ask them to look at grant applications. I'm going down to the shelter after work today to visit with the children. I would love someone to accompany me, right? Or I'm about to send out a donor letter. Would you be interested in authoring it as the board member, right? Or we're going to have a thankathon next Thursday, and we want all of our board members to make calls for us. I mean, there are just ways I would constantly figure out ways to keep my board engaged in fundraising and keeping them active and learning what's going on in between board meetings so that they felt like they were part of the process. There was never a time when board members felt like we don't know what we should be doing, because I had a whole long checklist of things every week. And every week my list would change, right? Because this week I might have to make a donor call. Next week I might have to submit a grant application. And so you might be free this week and you have a little extra time to come down to the shelter and serve dinner. Or you may be free next week and you can spend some time looking at that grant application. But I would figure out ways to keep my board involved and engaged in the work that we were doing inside the organization on a regular basis. And it really did work. In addition to that, I had a box of greeting cards underneath my desk. I knew birthdays, I knew anniversaries. So I was constantly sending them. If someone was sick, I was sending them a care package. I was constantly nurturing those relationships. So they trusted me. They felt like I was making a concerted effort to know who they were as individuals, that I cared about their child's performance, ballet performance. Got tickets to events. Like I really, really went all in to try to build relationships with this board as the chief fundraiser so they could trust me, so that when I called them and they saw my name and number, they would pick up the phone. Right. They knew I was calling because I needed something and they were willing to help me because of the relationship that I built with them. So again, this is hard work. It's not easy, and particularly when you're the fundraiser and you have all these other responsibilities. Yes, the board is a stakeholder group that you have to cultivate relationships with as well. And you have to reach out and let them know how, pull them in. How can you keep them engaged with fundraising in between board meetings? Okay, I hope I answered that question. So this is just a slide here about why board fundraising matters. You guys know that, you have to be passionate about the organization. 100% giving often makes you eligible for grants from foundations, all of those things. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. All right, only 5% of nonprofits list fundraising as a strength. That's really horrible, right? We know that it's not optional, but only 5% of nonprofits are saying we're really doing a great job with our fundraising efforts, right? 68% of board members are required to make a donation. When we say required, we ask board members, and that's another big controversy, you guys, whether or not we should ask board members to make a donation of 500 or 1,000 or give them a specific amount, or whether we should say it should just be a meaningful donation, right? A lot of people say we should do that because that's going to prevent some folks who might not have the ability to make $500 or $1,000 from serving on the board. So you have to know who's on your board and what they can possibly do. Only 46%, less than half of boards report 100% giving, which is also sad, right? And then we know, of course, that all organizations would benefit. So fundraising is definitely not optional. We need it in order for our organizations to survive and thrive. And the boards have to be engaged in this process, right? So we as the fundraising staff have to do it. So these are some of the responsibilities, as you guys know. The number one thing I say is try to get them to make their personal donation first. Make it early in the year, right? Why is it important for board members to make their donations at the beginning of your fiscal year? Anybody? What you think? Sets tones for others, right? Absolutely. Well, for those small organizations, it gives them some cash up front too, right? If you have a small budget and not a lot of cushion, if you have board members that are giving you $300, $400, $500, $1,000 at the beginning of your fiscal year, that helps you get $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 in the coffers here, so you have some cash to actually spend. Yes, but they should know the fundraising goals of your organization. Money, 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 no money, no mission. I love it, right? A lot of times I'll ask board members, what is the fundraising goal this year of your organization? And I get all these blank stares. They're clueless. You don't know how much your organization needs this year in order for it to do well? If you receive $1 million anonymous gift, how would that money be spent? And I also get blank stares. And I would say, as a board member, if your organization receives $1 million unexpected tomorrow, you should know how that money would best be spent. Right? You should know who your competitors are. Who else in this ecosystem is doing the same work as your nonprofit? Who's supporting those other organizations? Who's on the board of those other organizations? Where are they getting their funding from? Like, these are some of the things that as a fundraiser, I was keeping my board aware of. Okay, we have 3 or 4 competitors who are doing the same work. You know, Firestone, American Express, and Wells Fargo are supporting them. They're not donors of ours. I'm going to see if we can try to get them on our calendar. Like, I'm really trying to keep the board aware of what's going on in the fundraising ecosystem of our organization. So these are the things that the board should be kept aware of, and you as the fundraiser, it's your responsibility to do that. And so it's a lot of work, but I really relied on my board to help raise money, and it worked. It worked. Let me give you an example. I remember I was working for an organization, and a couple years back, and Publix, the supermarket chain, was our biggest donor, right? Because we were a food program. And not only did they donate food for our families to eat, but they also was our biggest financial donor. And a couple of years back, when we had all of those like hurricanes and stuff in Florida, I guess I don't remember how years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago now. Publix is headquartered in Florida, right? And so they had people, always on TV, it was people standing on roofs because they were being flooded, and it was a hot mess. And they had to make an emergency turn and send resources to the families there in Florida. And so the allotment that they were going to give us, they just came to us and said, we're not going to be able to make our donation as we thought we would. And I was like, ah. So of course my CEO looked at me and was like, okay, so what are we going to do? And I'm like, I didn't have an extra $50,000 in my budget for this, you know? And so I turned to my board and I said, listen, guys, this money that we're going to get for this quarter is to be for our summer feeding program. The summer was coming up. How are we going to? And they scurried together. And one of the board members just took the helm. He went to his company, and I think they gave us like a $35,000 emergency gift. And then the other board members all chipped in and made up for that $50,000. But that was because I had built strong relationships with them. And in an emergency situation, a board member who had the ability to make something happen, he jumped in, and everybody else rallied around. And I'm convinced that it was because I had built strong relationships with them, and they knew what that organization was about. They knew that summer feeding program was essential for us to keep moving in throughout the year. So anyway, that was a win for me. But no, that's just a prime example. Okay, so you guys know the board member fundraising responsibilities: thanking donors, making contributions, attending face-to-face solicitations. Let's move forward. Okay, the development committee. Oh my goodness. So, this is one of the most important committees on your board. Often, they're kind of fledgling and kind of haphazard, and it really should be a strong committee. And so this was a committee that I staffed, right? And I worked with the development chair very closely to make sure the development committee knew all the things. They knew our budget, they knew our priorities, they knew our talking points, they knew when our programs needed help. And so they were able to kind of advocate for us to the rest of the board, right? But you had to meet with them regularly, right? You had to keep them abreast. You had to make them feel like they were part of what's going on, not just when you're going to have a big gala or a big event and they're responsible for selling tickets or helping with sponsorships, but throughout the year, making sure that they're educated about what's going on inside the organization. Transparency is so important. So this development committee is helping to lead the fundraising efforts, going back to the board and saying, okay, guys, we have to make sure that as a board, we're reaching our fundraising goal, right? As a board, we're responsible to raise $30,000. We're not pulling our weight. What do we need to do, right? And so this development committee could really be a strong advocacy committee for you if you keep them educated, if it's run. I had to make sure I was talking to my development chair 2 or 3 times a week. Like just calling to say good morning, want to see how your morning is going. Let me tell you what's happening. We're about to submit this grant application, blah, 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 or we just sold 2 more tables, or I'm hiring a new major gifts officer today. Like I'm just keeping him or her abreast of what's going on with fundraising on a regular basis so that committee was educated, informed, and ready to jump in whenever I needed them. And it worked. Okay, let's move forward. All right, so here's my little poll question. I want you to spill the tea. So the poll is, I have board members who are 100% fired up and are killing it with fundraising from our organization. And so your responses could be, yes, they're killing it. No, not at all. A few, but not all of them. Or I have no idea. So I'd love to get your feedback. What do you think? Your board is really, 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 really all in with fundraising for your organization, or they're in outer space. Or we have a few, but not all of them, which is probably the case for most of us.
Just waiting on a few more responses. Looks like it's slowing down. So I'm going to end the poll and you should see the results.
Okay.
Now.
Okay. A few, but not all. I figured that would be most. Yeah.
Yeah.
No one's, wait, is that a 0 for yes, they are killing it?
Yeah. Well, they're in the right spot. They're in the right webinar.
Oh, no. No, not at all. Oh, my goodness. 16%, 78% a few, but not, well, I have no idea. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, a few, but not all is usually going to be typical. You usually have 2 or 3 that's doing most of the work anyway, which is sad. And that's why it's so important for your board chair and your CEO and your development director to be reaching out to board members, because we often don't check in with them to say, how is this board experience feeling for you? Are you enjoying it? Are we using your skills optimally? Is there anything else we can do to keep you more engaged with the organization? What other things are you interested or passionate in about that we're not pulling out of you, right? And so once who has attention for detail, who's a people person and likes to get out and talk to people, right? As soon as you start learning a little bit about your board members, you kind of know where to place them, like who would be good to do what, right? And so if your board chair and your director, your CEO is not meeting with your board at least one time a year, once a year, they should be having coffee, virtual or in person, with each board member to just say, hey, how's it going? I noticed that you've been to all the board meetings. Do you feel like we're doing a good job with our board meetings? Is there anything that you want us to discuss that we're not discussing? Why did you join the board in the first place? Just like really kind of getting a feel for who they are and checking in. And I'm the worst board member to have right now, because I called my board chair not so long ago and said, okay, we're in Q3 of 2023, and you have not called me once to see how I'm doing, how my board experience is going. I haven't made my full gift to the board, to the organization yet. You've not checked me on that. Like, I need you to stay on top of me as a board, and they're like, oh, I told you when you asked me to be on this board that I was going to hold you accountable as the leaders, right? And so I'm the worst board member you can have because I'm going to definitely hold you accountable. But it is really, again, those two people, the board chair and the CEO, should be building those relationships with the board members, checking in so that when it comes time to ask them to do something like put something on social media or, advocate for they'll be willing to do it. Okay, let's move forward. Is there a question?
I have two questions I'm going to sneak in here.
Okay.
The first one from Kathleen asking, would you treat the board of directors and board of trustees the same if it applies to your organization?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
And then we have one here from Julie. She's talking about a development committee. We have a real problem with this. How do you get people to even participate on this committee? I had to all but beg people to be part of this, and then they do very little. Maybe the event committee should morph into this. I feel your struggle, Julie.
Yes, me too. I definitely do. And again, that's really helping to kind of ease people's minds about what fundraising is, right? And so, I often tell people we advocate for things we want in our personal lives all the time. And fundraising is asking for what you want and what you need, right? So when you go to your child's school to talk to your child's teacher because your child needs some help, or maybe there's been some altercation, and you go up to that school and you say, I need to speak to the principal because my child A, B, C, and D, you're advocating for your kid. You're asking for what you want and need. When you go in the grocery store, and this is me, right? You go into the grocery store and there's like 35 people in line and one register open, and I say, listen here, I come in this grocery store way too often for you not to have more registers open, either in person or the self-check lines. Why are the self-check line registers not even open? I demand to see a manager. So I'm constantly advocating for myself, something that I feel righteous about or that I feel that I deserve. That is the same thing that fundraising is. It's going out and asking people to support something that you feel strongly about, that you know is good, that's going to do good work. Right. And so if you feel strongly about it, just like you feel like you should advocate for your kid or ask for a new register to be opened in Kroger or Publix or whatever your supermarket is, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. And if you feel strongly about it, you're willing to take the risk. You need to care more than fear. That's what I always tell people. Feel the fear and do it anyway. Ask people. Right. And as long as you get them to understand that fundraising really is advocating for what you want to make the world a better place, then you shouldn't feel the trepidation about being a fundraiser. It really is just about asking and being willing to hear the word no. And practice with your board what asking is. And I think once they feel comfortable and understand what fundraising is and what it's not begging people. It's not hitting people up, you're not a salesperson, right? You're not trying to, to be slimy and trying to this is making them understand this is something they already care about, right? And they have the ability and the power to make something happen through their donations, right? And so I think once we start changing how people perceive fundraising, you'll have more people willing to sign up to be on the development committee. And that's kind of what I had to do. And my development committee was really small. I only had 3 people. I wish I had 5 or 8, but I worked those 3 people. I worked those 3 people because they were on board with me. So, okay. So I always talk about having a fundraising toolkit for your board, right? You want to make sure, I call it the POP box, the points of pride box, right? Making sure that when you start with your board, here's the fundraising toolkit. This is what should be in that kit. Of course, the mission statement, the case for support, right? Why we should care and give to your organization, the annual report, if you're still doing that, right? The budget and what the fundraising goals are for the year, some compelling stories and points of pride, right? Giving habits about your female donors, your donors of color, so they can understand what it's like to cultivate and build relationships with non-traditional donors, right? If your donor database is 75% white men, and you have 30% other females, or even though we know that most donors are female, but the other part of your donor base, 30% are Black and brown people, how are we cultivating relationships? How are we building relationships with those people, right? And that's a whole nother training. Understanding how to make the ask, understanding how much to ask for. right? Have a staff directory in case you have any questions, and what your stance and where your organization stands on DEI, because that's important now. So this is the toolbox you give to your board, making sure every one of these things are in your toolbox. So at their disposal, and we have board portals now where you can put all these documents in the board portal so they can have access to your annual report and your mission and your budget and all that stuff should be in there. So at any time at 3 o'clock in the morning as a board member, if I want to go and see what your case for support is, I can go into my board portal and pull it up. But you want to make sure that they have their fundraising toolkit. And these are the points of pride I'm talking about. Just like some bragging points that they can talk to people about. So while I'm standing in Kroger in the long line and someone says to me, what have you been up to? And I said, oh, I'm a board member of this wonderful organization. And they said, oh, really? What do they do? Why are they wonderful? Oh, my goodness. Well, we helped more than 250 children in 2023. We celebrate, our volunteers spend their birthdays and holidays with us. Because of the work we do, 37% of our clients have earned college degrees and can now support their families. You want to have some really good talking points that your board can share with the world, right? They should be able to have these points and they can talk to them, whether they're in the grocery store, or whether they're at the gym or at church or in another meeting on the golf course. They can talk to people about who your organization is and what some of the wonderful things you do so that they can be aware, right? So points of pride, the points of pride fundraising box. Okay, let's move forward. Again, care more than fear. I talked about kind of pushing past the fear, really helping them to understand. I know it's scary sometimes to ask people for money, but once you just kind of decide this organization is worth it. I know the good work that you're all doing. And I know that when I bring more people into the fold as donors, we're going to have the ability to help more people, to help the environment, to help animals, whatever it is. So care more than fear. Let's move forward. Right. So again, take the fear out of fundraising, changing your language about hitting people up and being kind of a sales rep. And we want to sell you this thing. We're not selling. We're just talking to you about our mission. We're telling you the great work we're doing, right? We're giving you wonderful stories and examples, practicing and role playing with your board members. Okay, let's pretend. So for instance, I remember a board member one time said that he was going to reconnect with a college buddy who he hadn't seen in many years, but he knew had done well, who was successful. And they were gonna go fishing, and they had some other things they were gonna do. And he says, I really do believe that this guy is in a position to make a large donation to the organization, but he doesn't know anything about it, and I don't know how to bring it up, And so I sat with him and let's do some role playing. Tell me a little bit about this friend, how he became successful, how did he make his money, what things do you know about him in terms of his passions and his interests, and now let's role play what this could look like. Like really, let's go back and forth, and what you should say and the kind of information you should share, and what you should say if he says no. I mean, all of those things. And so I said to him, well, the very first time you meet him, you don't want to maybe ask a direct ask because you haven't been in touch with him for a long time. You might want to just say, I have this great organization. They're doing phenomenal work. Let me share a little bit about it. I would love for you to consider getting more involved with the organization. Can I invite you to the next event? Or can I send you the newsletter or whatever? And just kind of slowly pull him in. And then we could talk about when it might be the right time to make a good donation to the organization. So I just kind of worked through that with him about how this give and take should go in this first conversation, practicing the role play of asking, and then making sure they have the tools and techniques to do what they need to do. Okay, let's move forward. All right, so again, questions that they should know, things they should know before making any kind of ask. Of course, the mission, why this mission is important to you as a board member. Of course, they should have compelling stories, all the things that we just talked about in that pop box. Okay, let's move forward. Asking for what you need and for a specific amount. Again, if we decide that the guy who's meeting his college buddy, if you're going to ask him for $500, how would you ask for that? And then how will you tell him that money will be spent? Well, listen, Don, I know we haven't seen each other in a long time, but I'm working for this phenomenal organization. I'm so excited about it. I would love if you would consider like an early gift of just maybe like $500. because I know this $500 will be able to help a student get a chemistry book they need in order for them to pass their class, whatever it is, right? And then making sure they're aware of how to use peer-to-peer opportunities on social media, Facebook's anniversaries, being responsive to all of the, if you post something on social or someone makes a comment, making sure you respond. And then of course, sending big thank yous, and then reposting and letting everybody know that this person may have given to your organization. So teaching them again, how to make the ask. Okay, again, because these are just volunteers, right? They're not professional fundraisers like us, right? So they may not be trained in how to ask and how to talk and what's important and what to look out for. Listen to those words, those nuanced things that the person is not saying, all the things that we know as trained fundraisers. They don't know anything about that. So it's our job to teach them that, right? And or say to them, you set up the conversation and then I'll finish it off. I'll make the ask if you're not comfortable with making it, but at least get it going. Okay, move forward. All right, so asking them to create a goal for themselves. Okay, well, this year I'm gonna give myself, I'm gonna raise $1,000 this year for the organization. That's my wiggle room. But realistically, I could probably only do 750, but I'm gonna strive for 1,000. So they know going in at the beginning of the year how much money they're gonna try to help raise for the organization, right? Give or get. Sometimes you can give or get, or sometimes give and get, but create a goal. And then I used to tell them, listen, let's take out our phones, everyone, and we're going to scroll through our contacts, because inevitably there is somebody in your contact list who does not know that you serve on this board, right? And so let's go through our names. And I tell them to scroll, we scroll, and I want you to write down 3 or 4 names of individuals who don't know you serve on this board, who don't know anything about your nonprofit, but if you were to ask them, could probably make a $250 or $300 gift right now. And inevitably, they'll go through their list, and I go around the room, and each person says, well, yeah, I mean, there's John, and he's my neighbor, and he's general counsel for Home Depot. I know that if I talk to him about it, he could probably do 250. And then, my cousin Dion, she works at, she's head of HR for Barnes and Noble. I never really thought about mentioning to her. And then there's the girl in my book club, Andrea. She's, oh my God, she's a big VP at Bank of America. And I never even thought about that. So I literally have them go through this exercise, and they will see that there are 3 or 4 people in their phones that they have never thought about asking or telling them about the organization. And then we work through I sit down with them, let's go through the 3 or 4 names. What is the best way to contact this person? Do you want me to contact them? Do you want to call them? Do you want us to go on a call together? How should we do this? And I would actually work with that board member to contact those 3 or 4 people they actually put on their list. I'm just saying. Now, before I move on, Wendy, questions? Are there any questions out there that I'm not answering? I don't want to do all the talking. I want to make sure that people are getting their questions answered.
Yeah, we don't have any questions right now, but a reminder to participants, if you have any, use that Q&A feature and Crystal will answer them.
Yes. I know I'm talking a lot. I'm trying to get all the good information into you guys, but I want to make sure that I'm being responsive to what you want to know as well. All right. So creating a touch plan. Get down, Charlie. Stop it. My little dog is stop. All right, Charlie. Here, look. Here, everybody. Here's Charlie. Okay. Say hi to your people, Charlie. Say hi. All right, so create a touch plan, right? So that your board has a plan that they can, for a couple times a month, create touch plans, right? Maybe say we're going to do 2 touches per week for 3 months. A touch plan could be a phone call, an email, a social media post, a holiday card, right? And you can put it on social media. You can be awesome for kids like Jenna, right? This is St. Jude. St. Jude is my weakness. I always want to give to them because the cancer thing for kids just drives me nuts. But you can be awesome for kids like Jenna. Give a small gift of $150 to help her family with hotel accommodations for them as she gets closer to her surgery date, right? Put a picture like this on social, and then give to stjude.org, right? And that's a touch plan that you create, right? Let's move forward. Right, and so I'm gonna ask you, this was about telling good stories. We're gonna skip this because I know time is of the essence, but really want to talk about creating good stories. And so here's a story that I made up, you guys, right? So our client Stacy found herself and her 5-year-old daughter homeless, living in their car after her husband was senselessly murdered, right? He was the primary breadwinner. Stricken with grief and depression, she turned to friends who sheltered them for a while, but she soon had nowhere to go. After moving into our clean and safe family shelter, an assigned case manager worked with Stacy on her self-esteem. They discussed healthy eating habits and managing her health, spending time with her daughter, and moving from part-time to full-time with her company. And after 6 months, she lost 18 pounds, landed a full-time position, found an apartment in a quiet neighborhood. And today, Stacey has been promoted to director at her job. Zoe's on the honor roll, and they're saving to buy a house. As a board, I serve on a board of an organization that believes giving people the wraparound services they need to become stable and successful is the best way to pour back into communities and save lives. Please help us to support more families like Stacey and Zoe. You can post that on Facebook, social media, right? So give them compelling stories like that. I just made that up, right? I used to work at a homeless shelter, so I had some reference, but give stories like this to your board that they can actually share on Facebook, on social media, and people will give, I promise. Okay, let's move forward. So we also know this is about digital fundraising and making sure that they're aware that digital fundraising is a real thing, right? That donors are now living in a hyper-connected world. That 12 online giving increases every year by 12%. 21% of online donations come from a mobile device, right? That's important to know. 59% of donors watch a video before giving, right? So videos are really important. Okay, let's move forward. So when you want to empower them to go digital by using social media, again, taking advantage of peer-to-peer opportunities, creating videos, taking selfies, making run, jump, walk for your cause kinds of campaigns, and sharing your personal story to help someone to give. And I'm going to give you some examples. We're going to go through these really quickly. Okay, so the first one, again, is peer-to-peer, right? And using life events to raise money, like birthdays and anniversaries, using social media as a primary way to communicate, making it fun and easy, right? And then next, we want to talk about using your own phone. You could take a selfie just like this guy did, right? As a board member, have them take a selfie. They can do a handwritten note like this guy did and says, I support Horizon House because of their partnership with so-and-so and so, or I'm a board member of Horizon House. Please give. Trust me, it's an investment worth making. Give $250 and support us here. Here's our website. Easy. Take a selfie. Next thing, make a video. Create a personal video explaining why you serve on the board and why the organization is a great investment. Post on social media and ask for $350. Right? In memoriam gifts, share a moving story about a friend or a family member who might be ill and ask somebody to make a strength gift in his or her honor. I'm just giving you some ideas. And this is a personal story. I lost my partner to COVID in 2020. And some friends actually put together a scholarship online. They did a crowdfunding campaign for me and my family so that I can keep my son in private school. And we wrote a compelling story. We put it on the crowdfunding campaign. The goal was $4,500. We raised nearly $7,000 so that I can pay my son's tuition that year. And these people who were giving to us were complete strangers. They didn't know anything about me or my son or my partner who passed away. But they gave us money, $200 and $300 and $400 gifts, because of the compelling story that was written about our situation. So I'm just telling you, crowdfunding works. Come up with compelling stories, put it out there, and people will give, even if they don't know anything about your organization. If the story is wonderful, if it's moving, if it pulls on the heartstrings, people will donate. Okay, let's move forward. And then, in this time of virtual, remember during COVID when we couldn't meet in person, everyone was having parties and everything virtually, we can still do that. We haven't moved away totally from virtual. So you can have a virtual party, a summer party, a Christmas party, create a signature drink, add karaoke, add some kind of entertainment, and ask everybody for $150 to get the Zoom link. Right? So I'm just saying, these are ideas for your board members to do things that is fun, that can keep people engaged. And people will do that, if they want to come to your party or your event, they will pay the $150 to support you and your organization. Okay, I think there might be one or two more. Oh, and the other thing that I did during COVID is I walked a lot, right? And so I started walking and I realized this was a wonderful way for me to start raising money, right? So I asked friends to pledge money, $5 for every mile I walked, right? So, and then along the way, I was posting about things like, the streets, the plants, the interesting street signs. And people were actually excited and interested to see what was going on my walks. If I said hello to Mr. Johnson, or somebody's beautiful flowers was budding, or the dog always barked at me, whatever. And people were actually pledging for me and promoting me to be healthy and to walk in $5 a mile. So just being creative, just give your board creative ideas of ways that they can raise money for you that are not traditional, and people will get into it. I know it seems a little weird, but people will actually do it, right? Let's move forward. Again, I talked about sharing an infographic, right? Making sure that your board has all of these numbers and statistics. Videos, as I've mentioned, are really popular. People will watch videos and then donate. But it's on us inside the organization, the CEO, the fundraising staff, to make sure this information is ready and plentiful and accessible to our board members, to allow them to be able to be equipped and ready to raise money for us. So having this infographic to them. And then this last little tidbits, right? Making sure the development committee is equipped and engaged. Know that board members can be great fundraisers without ever really having to ask anyone, right? Donors worried about giving large gifts to young organizations without a history can set their monies aside in donor advised funds. That's something else we hadn't talked about, right? And so make a request button available on your website. I mean, this is a whole bunch of things. So it's on us on the inside of the organization to make sure that our board members are equipped, because they're not trained fundraisers. They don't know. So as the fundraising team, as the development director or the chief development officer, work with your board, build those relationships so that they will want to help you. Okay, I think there might be one more slide. All right, so tips for your board members who say, you know what, I'm not scared to ask, I'll ask. Make the ask personal, bring the documents that they need, map out the conversation, have a plan if you get a no, and know the next steps that are going to be needed after they say yes or no to your ask. And last, here's a picture that you can put on your website of your board members holding a sign that says, thank you for giving to our organization, right? Again, a stewardship gesture, right? And then last, things your boards can do to fire up the fundraising. Cultivate 3 new friends each quarter, send your mission stories out, host a party online or at home, the peer-to-peer campaigns, make your personal videos, recruiting future board members who are willing to fundraise, emerge in culture, stay involved, and have fun and excite others. And I think that's the end of my presentation. So thank you all. I hope this was helpful. I was trying to calm my dog Charlie down. I hope this was helpful. I hope that the information will be something that you can use. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is hello@theboardpro.com. If you want me to work with your board in fundraising, I'm happy to do that. But thank you so much for inviting me, Wendy, and for allowing me and Charlie to be here with you all today.
Oh, it was so nice to have you and Charlie. That was so much fun. Your energy was amazing. I want to thank you so much for joining QGIF for this webinar. I want to thank all of the attendees for your participation in the chat, for taking time out of your busy fundraising schedule. And just a reminder, you will be receiving the slides and a recording of this webinar tomorrow. You want to look at Charlie again because he is such a
Bye, everybody.
There's
I think I saw my friend Kathleen Vincent on there. I want to say hi to Kathleen. All right, guys.
There is a survey afterwards. So when you sign off the Zoom, please just fill that out and submit for CFRE if you're going for that.
Yay.
Thank you again. We'll talk soon, Crystal. And thank you everyone for attending today.
Happy summer. Bye.
Happy summer.